In this morning's passage from Isaiah, the prophet comes to the people of 6th century Jerusalem with another message from God. I often wonder how well these sometimes confrontational, mostly unpopular prophetic messages were received by the people. Prophets were one of two major religious voices in Jerusalem at this time, the other being the priests. But to me, the prophets had the much tougher gig. Oh great, here comes Isaiah again. What are we doing wrong now? And if you'll flip through the prophets, there's not a lot of good job, keep up the good work type of language, and not a lot of jokes or humorous illustrations to break up the tension either. Not in it for the popularity, prophets basically had one job, one assignment: go to the people on behalf of God. Priests, on the other hand, went to God on behalf of the people. And there has got to be some sort of joke in there about the job of Baptist pastors, perhaps being the ones to go to God on behalf of committees or potluck lunches, but I couldn't quite sort it out. If you can think of that punchline, send me an email. I'd love it. The setup is prophets go to the people on behalf of God, priests go to God on behalf of the people, Baptist pastors, that's where you come in. Just think about it. I couldn't spend any more time on that joke, so I moved on. So prophets spoke to the people on behalf of God, priests spoke to God on behalf of the people, and often those messages just didn't line up. In the face of impending attacks by outside forces, the prophet would plead with anyone who would listen to him to begin acting like a community that God would want to spare, or be prepared to be conquered and possibly exiled. It was out of this tension between prophets and priests and the people that the prophetic books of the Bible, like Isaiah, Micah, and Jeremiah, were born. And I want to go over this morning's passage one more time and give you another shot at hearing it, this time in my own words. If you are familiar with Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of the Bible called The Message, that's what I have in mind, but this is my own words. Eugene Peterson's paraphrase comes from his research and a scholar's understanding of the original Hebrew text. Mine does not. So here goes Isaiah 58 in my own paraphrase. Isaiah, I, God, am sending you to the people of Jerusalem on my behalf to deliver a message. Tell them the following. I can see that you are fasting and trying to gain my favor, and while I really appreciate the effort, I did not ask for any of this. Your fasting and acts of piety have empty motives and benefit yourselves only, often at the expense of your community. Why would that interest me? The fast that I want is one that results in justice and peace for all my people. If you want to give me a gift, take care of those in need and care for those who are hurting, even when it is not easy or convenient, especially when it is not easy or convenient. Then you will be a light and you will be a part of the healing process, and I will answer your call. I wouldn't expect any of you to follow my paraphrase with, "This is the word of the Lord, thanks be to God." But I hope it helps you to have heard once again just what sort of religious and spiritual issues the Jews were facing in this particular period of Jewish history, according to the prophet Isaiah. The book of Isaiah as a whole, which is generally divided into three distinct sections, covers a fairly large chunk of Israel/Judah's story, spanning as many as 250 years, according to some scholars, from the mid-8th century to the late 6th century. By the time Isaiah opens in chapter 1, Israel in the north and Judah in the south are already two separate kingdoms, and actually Israel has already fallen to Assyria, being completely destroyed in the process. The prophecies of the first of these three sections of Isaiah deal with the threat of attack by those Assyrians, as they have taken care of Israel and are now approaching Judah and its capital, Jerusalem. In the second section of Isaiah, fast forward about 150 years or so, and the Jewish people are now in exile in Babylon. The Babylonians, having conquered the Assyrians, continued on to Jerusalem and unceremoniously destroyed the temple and the entire holy city before marching most of the Jews out of their homes to go live in Babylon. And when we get to the third section of Isaiah and this morning's passage, the Persians have now conquered the Babylonians. and in 538 BC have allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem, rebuild the city, rebuild the temple, free to worship and serve their God. It is in this relatively peaceful period of Judah's history, now under Persian control, that we find the Jewish people no longer worried about an imminent attack or having to come to terms with living in a foreign land. Rather, they have time to figure out how to be the people of God, how to please God, how to give gifts to God. Unfortunately, as we have already read, it appears that they struggled to discover how to give to God, focusing on individual acts of piety, such as fasting, rather than on broader acts of generosity that would have benefited the community. Apparently, the act of fasting, which had certainly begun as an authentic gift to God and as a way to draw closer to and increase dependence on the Lord, had become so twisted that God just didn't have much use for it. And the ones who fasted religiously had somehow figured out how to turn the process into personal and social gain. Fasting had not only become an empty ritual that even God could not redeem, but the practice had also become a social investment benefiting the fasters. The gift had become all about the giver and not about God. As I have been reading and thinking about the situation of the Jewish people living in post-exilic Jerusalem, giving gifts and offerings to God that, number one, didn't seem to interest God, and number two, actually turned the once holy act of fasting into a transaction of personal gain, I cannot get out of my head the Simpsons episode when Homer, looking for the perfect Valentine's Day gift for his wife Marge, decides on a bowling ball. Not just a bowling ball, but a bowling ball on which he paid to have his initials engraved. Clearly, this is the worst gift ever, and I am so grateful to Homer for his many acts of buffoonery. He has shown me what not to do in my own marriage time after time. I am a product of the generation that seems to be able to tie almost any situation or life experience to the three S's. That's Seinfeld, Star Wars, and The Simpsons. In fact, if you carry on a conversation of any substance with me, no matter how noble or academic, if one of the three S's doesn't come up, it is most likely by a demonstration of personal restraint and force of sheer will on my part. Despite this predilection to pop culture analogies, I have, in the nearly 3 years that I've been periodically preaching from this pulpit, basically steered clear of the three S's in my sermons, my lone allusion to Star Wars last year being a hidden reference to Chewbacca that only a true fan would have detected. And I have managed to avoid The Simpsons altogether until this morning. So forgive me. Just as Marge doesn't quite know what to do with an engraved bowling ball that was never for her anyway, or with a husband who would give her one, God no longer seems to know what to do with this gift of fasting, or rather what fasting had become. Fasting that somehow benefited the ones who were doing the fasting and not God. Valentine's Day is coming up this week, I guess, and now I know that's a day looked forward to by some, and by others, not so much. But here is some free relationship advice. Guys and gals, this Valentine's Day, when you're looking for that perfect gift for your spouse, for your boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, no bowling balls with your initials engraved on it. And oddly enough, I have the same advice on how we can give pleasing gifts and offerings to God. Make sure the gift is not about you. Now, how do we do that? How can we make sure our gifts to God are about God? This past Friday and Saturday, members from 4 of our church's Sunday school classes got together for a young adult marriage retreat. Close to 60 of us participated, although I don't recall seeing any actual young adults in attendance, the term young adult being a moving target here at First Baptist. And after looking around at everyone at the retreat this weekend, myself included, let's just say that target has definitely moved. Atkins Boughton, Quantinia, the Link class, Blue Heaven are the names of the classes that I've just offended, and we all had a great experience. Kyle led us. It was really good. But this was the 15th retreat for the Atkins Boughton class, the first of which was held back in 1999. when the class was known as the comatose class, or comites, or comatose, however you wanted to pronounce it. And as someone mentioned this weekend, when we were actually young adults. That first retreat was led by Callista Adkins, one of my favorite people in the world. Most of you know her. And she walked us through a book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Not the Gary Chapman who used to be married to singer Amy Grant. It's apparently a different Gary Chapman. The 5 Love Languages is in our media center. It's worth the read. And when I have had the occasion to participate in pre-marriage counseling, I have used its model of how to effectively communicate with and truly give of yourself to your partner. The book's premise is that we all have a preferred love language, a category and pattern of relating to our significant others, and to which our gifts to them tend to fall. The better you know your spouse's love language, and the more willing you are to use this knowledge to make your gifts and acts and communication completely about them and within that love language, and vice versa, the healthier the relationship is, and the healthier the relationship will be. For instance, if your spouse treasures quality time, think of gifts and go on dates that require both of you to be completely present and focused on each other. If your partner values words of affirmation from you, then think of creative ways to consistently build up your partner, even if it's not your preferred style. I know a guy who finally realized after 15 years of marriage that his wife just likes flowers, and that he should give flowers to his wife, even though to him it makes no sense, because aren't they just going to wilt and fall apart in a few days? And when he finally did start giving her flowers, and after he realized the flowers are about him, about her, and not about him, he had discovered one of his wife's love languages and began giving gifts to her that she prefers and that are about her and not him. The identity of the not-so-bright and slow-to-learn husband in this example is not important. What is important is that I'm sure he meant well and that he did eventually get there. To me, the very commitment to bending toward your spouse or partner in speaking their love language and giving them gifts that are truly for them is the real gift. Is it any different as we seek to relate to and give gifts to God? I think that a big part of our individual journey of faith and our collective journey of faith as a church is really finding out who God truly is and what God's vision for the people of this world is and what God's love language is, so that we can bend toward that vision and discover how to give gifts to God that truly serve God. Truly knowing God is a lifelong challenge, which is never complete. But to know anything about God is to understand that God needs nothing, yet desires so much for us to care about each other enough that our resources and compassionate acts will naturally flow toward those who need them the most. If you were able to attend the Just Faith conference a few weekends ago led by Jack Jezreel, you might remember his illustration that water will always find the lowest points of any given container or surface, and that true Christian compassion and care will do the same for any given community, naturally bending toward basic necessities for the poor, pastoral care for the hurting, causes for the underrepresented, and healing for the broken. Basically, paying attention to those places where God's attention is. Although we as a church do plenty for our community and congregation through our heart for missions and ministry and pastoral care and neighborhood partnership initiatives, this is not a pat ourselves on the back sermon, a look how far we've come pep talk. This is a challenge sermon. As a congregation, are we actively trying to figure out what moves God? Are we moved by those same things? Look at this morning's passage. Is this not the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to let the oppressed go free, share your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless poor into your house. It goes on and on. Or move toward the back of the Bible and chart the places where Jesus gravitated and the people to whom he related. It doesn't matter where you are on your faith journey, Challenge yourself to figure out what God is about. Work hard to determine where God's attention is focused in our church or our community, and see what gifts you can offer to God through those situations. In the book, The 5 Love Languages, one of the ways you identify someone's love language is by the gifts they themselves tend to give. Understanding God's love language clarifies for us how to relate to and serve God, how to give of ourselves to God in a way that God would find pleasing. Just as identifying the love language of your spouse or partner and then giving gifts of that nature from a place of selflessness is actually the gift in itself. If you're searching for that perfect gift for the God who needs nothing, yet desires so much for us, keep your attention and your resources focused on those on the margins with no power, those on the inside with no peace, and those everywhere who need healing. The divine love language points us away from ourselves, even away from God, and toward people in need, where we can be sure that when we give of ourselves to them, we give of ourselves to God.